What if everything we have been taught about marriage is incomplete? What if true marriage has very little to do with romance, compatibility, shared interests, or even physical attraction? According to Paramahansa Yogananda, the highest purpose of marriage is not emotional security, social stability, or the creation of a family. Its highest purpose is liberation. Modern culture teaches us to search for someone who makes us happy. But the great spiritual masters teach something very different. They teach that another human being can never become the ultimate source of our fulfillment. Why? Because every relationship based exclusively on personality, emotion, or physical attraction is temporary. Bodies change, desires change, circumstances change, but the soul never changes. And if marriage is to become truly spiritual, it must eventually move beyond the constantly changing world of the senses. Yogananda explains this extraordinary idea in the second coming of Christ. The culmination of marriage between soulmates is distinguished by the fact that the husband and wife no longer live on the sexual plane, not by forced abstinence, but in transcendence. Being together in perfect love, they become united with God. Notice that he does not say that a spiritual marriage requires repression. He does not say that husband and wife should reject each other. He says something much more profound. He says that transcendence happens naturally. The love between two souls evolves, it matures, it expands, and eventually it becomes something greater than physical attraction. Yogananda then makes a surprising distinction. He explains that even a beautiful, harmonious, and morally upright marriage may still fall short of its highest spiritual potential. He writes, "A marriage that is very harmonious but without God realization may be a moral marriage, an ideal socio-religious relationship on the human level, but falls short of being an actual spiritual marriage between soulmates, the end of which is liberation in God." This statement challenges many of our assumptions. A successful marriage is not necessarily a liberated marriage. A stable marriage is not necessarily a spiritual marriage. Even a loving marriage may still be centered on human attachment rather than divine realization. At this point, some people might wonder, does this mean that marriage is wrong? Does spirituality require complete celibacy? Yogananda answers that question directly. He writes, Jesus does not say it is wrong to marry and to bring good children into the world by nature's ordinary law of procreation. Marriage itself is not the problem. Having children is not the problem. The problem begins when sexuality becomes disconnected from its sacred purpose. He continues, "We must not think that there is sin in it, but there is inherent physical and spiritual danger in its misuse to stimulate and gratify sex consciousness for its own sake." According to Yogananda, excessive attachment to sensual pleasure affects not only the mind, but also the body. He explains that such attachment can weaken vitality and even affect the nervous and immune systems. But his primary concern is spiritual. He writes, "Spiritually, it is impossible to lift the consciousness into the kingdom of heaven, the Eden of the higher centers of God perception, without raising the life force from the lower spinal centers of sensual compulsions." In other words, consciousness naturally moves toward whatever gives it the greatest satisfaction. If our greatest satisfaction comes from the senses, our awareness remains tied to the material world. But if our greatest satisfaction comes from God, consciousness begins to rise. So how does this transformation happen? Yogananda gives us the answer. not through force, not through guilt, not through suppression, but through meditation. He writes, moderation in married life, supported by tasting of the infinite bliss of deep meditation and the unconditioned divine love of God in the soul, transmutes the consciousness in a natural way. Natural transformation. Those two words are extremely important. The spiritual path is not about fighting ourselves. It is about discovering something infinitely greater. Then Yogananda reveals one of the most beautiful principles in all of spirituality. When the joy of God, felt in meditation with stillness of breath, remains continuously in the soul, then the physical temptation vanishes forever through contrast. The joy in God becomes more tempting than all temptations. Read that sentence again. The joy in God becomes more tempting than all temptations. Not because desire was destroyed, not because life became joyless, but because divine bliss became stronger than every earthly pleasure. And perhaps the most remarkable example of this principle was Lahiri Mahasaya. Yogananda writes, one can even love husband or wife with the love of God and not love of flesh, as did Lahiri Mahasaya, my guru's guru. His marriage was to show people how the consciousness of God can tame temptation and how God's love can spiritualize and transmute conjugal love. What a revolutionary idea. Marriage itself can become a spiritual path. A husband can become a companion on the journey toward God. A wife can become a companion on the journey toward God. And together they can transform human love into divine love. Yogananda concludes with these powerful words. When one is irrevocably established in union with divine bliss, that consciousness can exist under all conditions of life. Real freedom can be accomplished in no other way. This is the ultimate message. The goal of marriage is not possession. It is not dependency. It is not emotional attachment. The goal is awakening, because every human relationship is temporary, but the soul is eternal. And when two souls help each other remember God, marriage becomes much more than a social institution. It becomes a sacred path toward liberation itself.